If we go maybe back to the ages when in a village, everyone had a contribution. But I think what modern society has done is made that contribution about dollars. So we now don't value when someone's contribution is not tied to the finance part. And I think that's the shift that we all can make. Someone can contribute to the village in a way that has nothing to do with dollars and still add an immense wealth and richness to the village.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Academy Podcast with the #1 international best-selling author and multi-award winning success and life coach, Kamil Shah. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking this opportunity to grow together with me, Kamil Shah, and my guests on this program. Each episode of the Academy Podcast is filled with insights and wisdom from my guests, which I believe can have a profound impact on the way we live our lives. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Academy Podcast with Kamil Shah. I hope you're doing really well in a state of peace and joy wherever you are listening to this. If you're out walking the dog, taking a stroll, if you're going out for a run, on the treadmill, on your commute to work, whatever you're doing, listening to this podcast, I'm wishing you well. Okay, so today's episode is going to be another amazing episode because I have another co-author of the #1 international best-selling book, Authentic, Courageous Humans Who Change Our Lives by Rewriting Their Story. Joining me today is Kristina Brummer. Kristina Brummer is a middle child, a lifelong learner, a peacemaker, a lover of small groups and good conversation. She is also a daughter, sister, niece, aunt, granddaughter, spouse, mother, and friend behind people in her life, happily supporting and sharing in the memories and experiences of those she loves. For nearly 30 years, her career has been in some form of a supportive executive administrative role, happily being the secret weapon behind top CEOs in corporate and nonprofit organizations. Then the shift happened. She is now the CEO of her own company, the Spectacular Middle Virtual Entrepreneur Support Services, bringing her years of experience working behind the scenes to the forefront to collaborate as a partner and integrator alongside other entrepreneurs, taking care of the details to build, manage, and grow their businesses so that they can focus on the tasks that move the needle for them and activate their own CEO status. In her chapter, she shares how she made some decisions to change her priority list and move her own name to the top, how being a middle child shaped her view on life, and how making the transition from employee to entrepreneur was a catalyst to realizing that she had put her own oxygen mask on first. Most recently, Kristina became an international best-selling author when the co-authored book, Authentic, Courageous Humans Who Change Their Lives by Rewriting Their Story, hit #1 in the Amazon charts across the globe. Welcome, Kristina.
Thank you, Kamil. So exciting to be here. As you know, this is my first podcast interview, so it's super exciting.
Awesome.
And I'm, excited to be on this journey with you from the start of getting to know each other in Authentic, and my own journey, which is what brought me to writing in the book.
Kristina, just a backstory for people tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
We got connected. Again, the book is amazing because it's connecting all of these different lives together. And we got connected when we were introduced by Tina. Tina said, "Oh, KB is going to send out, all the information." And we were like, "Who's KB?" We didn't know it's you, Kristina Brummer. Super, super amazing. The fact that, not only that you are organizing or helping organize the actual book, the content and everything, but you also have a chapter of your own in the book, which makes it super special as well, because you're telling your story and your journey. And it's kind of, looking through the lens, you're actually living it. On that note, I want to bring you in, Kristina, and, if you don't mind, just sharing with us your story into writing the chapter in the book.
Sure. Yeah, Tina was the catalyst for that. She and I have been working together in my company. I provide support services for her as she's building her company. And her and another one of my clients have coined my nickname of KB. So everyone's always asking who that KB person is, but it's me. So when Tina made this grand decision to start with this multi-author book to build her publishing company, she came to me with her idea full of light and excitement. And I said, yes, let's make this possible. So that started the process for me as a support for it. And then very shortly after that, she asked me to be a part of the book. My first reaction was, no, I don't have anything to talk about. But then when she shared what the story was about, I recognized that authentic was my journey. In I guess just before COVID started, I started working from home because I had a job that allowed me to do that. And that just fueled that fire of wanting to have more control over my day and being the one that is the CEO of my own life. And that also prompted me to take a look at some of the things that I shared in the chapter, which was how I had been, putting people first. And while you can still put people on your list, you need to be number one on your list, or you aren't really much help to anyone. And that brought the concept for my chapter about how you need to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can be helpful and beneficial to others. Before that, I worked in corporate, as you said in my bio. I had a long career in corporate and really had a lot of opportunities where people opened the door for me to learn. I always worked for top level CEOs that were entrepreneurs, and their willingness to let me see behind the curtain and my willingness to step through the door has made a really rich career full of lots of experiences and lots of learning. And I bring that forward to my own company now, being able to still, make sure I'm opening those doors for myself, but others. And that has been a really wonderful shift for me. Yeah. And I guess that's how I ended up there. I said yes to her. And then I got to do that fun part that you said about seeing the process from both sides as an author, and also as a supporter of all the authors, and feeding into the energy that everyone had with sharing their raw and authentic stories.
You are one of the key people in bringing all of this together. On behalf of, if I may, on behalf of all the other authors, I want to say thank you to you. I remember the night before the launch and, getting updates from you, just live updates. And I know it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing that, because, we're just indebted to you and Tina and also Cindy as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A few things that you've mentioned there, I'm really intrigued as well. A lot of people listening to this will be able to connect with what you've just said there. You talked about what I would describe as a tug of war between wanting to help and serve others first versus the fact that you need to help and serve yourself first, like you described there, putting on the oxygen mask first before you're able to help others. It's a struggle that even now I'm going through that from time to time, the fact that I have to check myself in order to serve others. Do I need to serve myself first? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that what I have found is it's a deep change that you need to make, because there's a lot of guilt and shame that goes with making that decision to put yourself first. And I think especially with your family of origin, often there's a whole nother web of emotions and things there. In my experience, I was a late bloomer. I didn't meet my spouse until I was in my early 40s. So I spent a lot of my adult life being a part of their world. So being a part of my sister, I have two sisters, younger and older, and integrating myself into their day to day. And then you become that really integral part of someone else's life. And when you make the decision that, whoa, I can't breathe anymore because I'm giving all of my energy to everyone else by my own choice, not by their desire. There's a sort of a breaking that happens because you're having that moment and they're kind of confused because to them, it's just still good. And so it was really painful for me and for them. I can't speak for them, but I'm assuming that, based on how it went, you change the rules and then people need to adjust. And I think that's probably the hardest part about it. But what I have learned throughout that process and even through writing the chapter is that each of us is having our own human experience. And we need to honor that because we end up with people in our day-to-day, whether that's by choice, family or family of origin or friends that we choose to have around us. And I think we tend to slowly pile on the weight of responsibility of carrying their loads, and not in a negative way, but in a way that we sort of lose connection with the fact that we have to care for our own selves and our own human experience. And as heartbreaking as it would be for them not to be there anymore, they have to have theirs. Like, we have to adjust to that. And in my own life, I've had it, I lost my mother at 21, and that seemed insurmountable to me then, but it wasn't. I have had, now almost 21 equal amount of years without her, and it doesn't diminish her impact on my life or her human experience, but this is now mine. And so it's just really kind of bringing that back to yourself to remember that putting yourself first is what we all should be doing in that selfless way, because then we can give more of ourselves to everyone else. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. The whole notion of being selfless. How do you become selfless? And, sometimes it's not being selfish. You have to, give yourself time, space, energy to grow yourself first in order to be able to kind of help others. I can't feed others if I don't have the energy myself. I have to take care of my health, my mental state, my physical state, then I can give. But there is that train of thought saying that, well, you should just give anyway. So I'm still trying to kind of navigate between both. Everyone's different, trying to find an equilibrium or kind of something that I'm comfortable with. But it is something that fluctuates. What you mentioned in the book, in the chapter as well, it does fluctuate. It's never kind of constant.
No, and I think everyone's amount of selfless and self-care, or whatever you want to call it, is different. Some people, that can be a 12-minute walk and they recharge themselves and then they're able to, and others it's longer. And I think what you need to do is figure out what that is for yourself. But I think the most important part is knowing that on the other side of that, when you can consistently show up for yourself, the richness of how you can show up for others is just so much more. And it much more than the guilt or the shame of you thinking you aren't showing up. So there is a duality for sure about everything in life. And, we are striving to find that balance. Like you said, where is my sweet spot? And I think we can often compare ourselves to others. I know lots of people who, to me on the outside, they're like the Energizer Bunny. They're just like constantly going. And when I don't feel like I can do that, I will compare, do that horrible comparison where I'm thinking, well, why can they do so much? And I today can't manage all of these things. And I think that's where I just have to remind myself that everybody's got a different size bucket. Your bucket might be small, theirs might be big, but you also don't know what's happening behind. So you just can't do the comparison, and you need to figure out what your oxygen level needs to be.
It's a great reminder, the fact that we can't go on continuing to compare ourselves with other people. And that's something that I'm reminding myself daily. As you say, look at other people, they're putting out a lot of effort, energy, helping people. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I want to do that as well. But, I'm me, I'm not them. They might, like you're saying, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. They might have extra help, whatever it is. But what I can control is what I can do. Again, like you're saying, bringing it back to yourself. How do I take care of myself so that I take care of the immediate people that I love and grow up from that point onwards?
Yeah. I mean, I think what, maturity comes with that as well. As you get older, I think you start to see less of the need to figure it all out and just more of the being in figuring it out. about. So you settle into that, letting go of that comparison a little bit, I think. And you look at yourself in a way that you're unique, in the sense that your role to play is yours and not anybody else's. And how many times have we heard that from everyone we know, like older people or parents or, mentors telling us to stay in your own lane. But I think it becomes really true when you're trying to grow, especially in what we're doing. Yourself, me, a lot of the other authors in the book are growing these heart-centric businesses. For myself, moving from an employee mentality to an entrepreneur mentality required me to let go of that comparison, to shift the way I see my value, in the sense of no longer like a paycheck value. But that requires you to do a lot more inner work than I think people would believe when you're shifting to working for yourself, which so many people are now. I mean, the whole conversation about the Great Resignation and all of that, there are a lot of people who are going to be going through this process of trying to peel away their self-worth and the comparisons from industry standards, or what an employee thought, like of trading the dollars for the hours. So I think that's a big change. I think that's something I'm still sitting in at the moment. Coming off writing the book, I mean, as authors, we know it's just one chapter, and it's, a tiny blip of what our life was and is and will be. But I think it sparked something when you write your own and read your fellow authors' chapters of something that they're sharing that is so authentic and raw. I think you see that thread of commonality where we're all trying to do exactly what you and I just talked about, trying to figure out how to be our own unique self, be in our lane, and grow in that and play that role within the fabric of everything that's around us.
You mentioned a few things that I want to come on there as well about your role, the shift of role. You mentioned about shifting from the employee to the entrepreneur. A lot of the authors in the book are on that similar journey. And I love how you described it, a heart-centric business. And you talk about value as well, reassessing your value. How are you, what's your value and your worth when you're an employee versus when you're now as an entrepreneur and trying to make a heart-centric change in the world. Can you touch on that as well, your journey from the employee to the entrepreneur and how that came about and how that's grown?
Sure. I think that's interesting. I started working when I was 11. I started babysitting. And then I didn't stop. I had a job when I was, it comes from sort of middle class family. So we had to have a job when we were a teenager, and I had 3. And then I, went to college and I still had 3. Like I just always worked. And it was my father was self-employed, as I shared in the book. So there was this work ethic of that being your worth, that being your value, how you worked hard, how you showed up and did your best job and those things. And I did that. But you're always integrating your worth with how well you do, how much you get paid, or how much your benefits are, or things like that. And that carried on through as I grew into corporate life as an adult. And it was always like that, but it was someone else determining that. You had to ask for it. I can think of many times when, I would ask for a raise. I would put together a proposal, very administrative. That hasn't changed. I would put together the PowerPoint and I would go to the boss and say, here's why I think I am worthy of this increase or these benefits. So you were always asking someone else to value your worth. When I started working for myself, the first transition was I just brought all of my corporate ideas and sensibilities into my own business. And I, within a few months, hated it. And I'm like, what's broken here? What do I need to shift? Because this just feels like I traded a regular paycheck for an uncertain paycheck as an entrepreneur. But now I'm actually working more than I was working when I was there, and I don't have benefits or sick days. So I was like, what did I do? And I think that was the moment when I went, oh, I'm acting as though I'm an employee and I'm actually the boss. I don't need to ask someone's permission to take time for myself. I don't need to ask someone's permission to pay myself what I feel that I'm worth. And that's a huge adjustment, because we can, even today, I had this conversation with someone recently. I said, Today, if I was to go back to a corporate job, which most of us who have shifted know we're not employable anymore because it's too good to work for yourself. But if I was to walk
Yes.
in some corporate office today, I know what number I wouldn't walk in the door for less. But why is it so hard for us to ask for that number when it's us asking others to pay us what we think we're worth? I don't know that I have fully answered the question. I just know that, well, I can use this podcast as an example. You graciously asked me a few times, and my introverted heart was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But I decided that I needed to, step out of that feeling that I couldn't and that I needed to. And that's how it is with the entrepreneur piece. You just have to step out of what you think you can't and be open to what you can. And I think that is the part of the mental shift that had to happen. And so I'm not there yet, but I am starting to show up for myself in the way that I would show up for myself if someone was paying me or validating me, but without that.
That's really interesting. I love the way that you've described it then. That it really got me thinking, and a lot of people tuning in, again, will resonate with this. If you're in a job, you're employed, myself included, if you were to ask to be asked, how do you value yourself? The first thing you would say, well, by my paycheck. This is how much I'm getting. And if I wanted to go to another job, well, how much are you paying me? So immediately I'm already valuing myself based on how much my income is. And is that a healthy way or even a right way of valuing your talent, your energy, this is some of the things that entrepreneur, when you become an entrepreneur, you no longer value yourself based on that paycheck. It's much more. That paycheck, obviously the money that comes in is a fraction of a bigger thing, a bigger vision, mission, whatever it is that you want to call of being an entrepreneur. And that's a really kind of interesting way of, I guess, bringing it home and reminding us, reminding myself as well.
I think it's about what's hard. The shift is when it's about you. And I think that was actually my point for the podcast, is you asking me is meant I had to talk about myself. So when it's about us as a person, it's a lot harder for most people to talk about. So when it's personal, that heart-centric part, it feels really difficult to quantify your value, to ask for your value, to make space for your value, because it's so personal, it's so vulnerable. But I think, you just said something like contribution becomes the question. When we have an employee mentality, we think we show up, we do the job we're prescribed to do, we get paid. That's our contribution. When we're an entrepreneur, it's about more than that. That's the whole reason we became an entrepreneur, is because just showing up and getting a paycheck was no longer enough. Not unlike some of the other things, of the reason why I moved to putting myself first, is just showing up the way I was in my life was no longer enough. I needed more for myself. And I think if we go maybe back to the ages when in a village everyone had a contribution, but I think what modern society has done is made that contribution about dollars. So we now don't value when someone's contribution is not tied to the finance part. And I think that's the shift that I'm trying to make, and that we all can make. Someone can contribute to the village in a way that has nothing to do with dollars and still add an immense wealth and richness to the village. And I think that's the shift for me anyways.
That's really interesting. I got reminded to my previous corporate job as well. And it's a similar experience, because at the end of the financial year, you would be judged on your, how much money did you bring in terms of, projects that you've worked on, and how much have you billed the client. And there's very minimal, I guess, assessment being looked at in terms of your contribution as a human being, as a person, as an employee, a person that comes into work and bringing, energy, effort, nothing of that. It just goes straight to the bottom line. How much have you charged the client? How much money, and your performance is based on that. And I'm thinking, well, is that healthy? We go back to the same thing that you've just mentioned, that you are judged on not you as a person, but how much are you bringing in, your contribution in terms of dollar signs, and not you as a person, as a human being in this organization.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts that needs to happen in our society is looking at the contribution of a person outside of the dollars. It's not an uncommon belief that our society is driven by financial decisions. And so how do we be a part of that movement that changes that? I think we're at the beginning of that. I think people are now, even in the time that we're in, where people are really, thanks to the pandemic, being faced with adjusting who they are and what they want to be as a contributor to society and what that looks like for them. And I think the question of, putting their own oxygen mask is probably more prevalent now than it ever was. Because I was listening to something the other day that was saying how people are leaving their professions, not just because of the work not being available, but because they literally had the time to pause and say, what am I doing? And is this valuable to me? What is my contribution? What do I want to do? And people who have, those professions that a lawyer, a doctor, those long commitment time that they had to put in to become those professions, are just deciding that is not the contribution they want to make. So I think that shift is definitely happening to people doing on a much bigger scale what I did on, to me, seemingly on a small scale, which was just to say, what do I actually want? And then being okay with allowing yourself to find the answer and then take action for that answer.
Yeah, what you mentioned there about the shift, big shift over the pandemic, myself included, a period of pause for us here, the couple of weeks, the 2 weeks where it was locked down. And it was kind of surreal because, when I looked out the window during the lockdown, you weren't allowed to leave the house, no cars. I could actually, for the first time since forever living in my apartment, I could actually hear the birds. If not, it would just, and that constant humming was not there. And it just felt like the earth just had a big kind of, just breathe a little bit. And it was surreal just looking around. And for me, it was a moment of reflection as well. And that's the shift happened where I said, what can I do? This is maybe the time that I've been thinking about doing all of this in the past, but never really had the time to do it. But the 2 weeks was like, wow, now's the time, I can't go on holiday. I'm not going on holiday. I'm not doing anything. I literally wasn't doing anything. And I was like, now's the time, let's start planning and let's start doing it. Like you're saying, a lot of people possibly found that shift happening in that period and point of contemplation, reflection of what they want in their lives, as opposed to being dictated by or not having the time to even think and navigate where their life was going.
To move out of the frenzy. And I think a lot of us are not able to do that for ourselves. And it's, this pause, as difficult as it is for all the other things, but the gift in the pause is exactly what you said. It's an opportunity to take a breath and to hear the birds and to hear your own thoughts. I think, we fill our day. I think about, social media and all of the access. My daughter's a teenager and all of the stuff that comes at them. And I think, how do you ever hear your own voice when all of this noise is happening? And I think for people, that was the pause. Like you said, you could finally hear the birds. It was like space was given, because then you can hear what it is that you want, or even hear that you're not okay with the current situation, to start asking yourself the question, what is next, or what is more? I think, I'm turning 52 this year, and it's the first time I've ever thought to myself, the first half is kind of done. And that first sense of urgency of, am I contributing, or have I contributed enough? And what do I want that next piece to be? I always want it to be something that is filled with vitality and not just existing. And I think that is something you don't allow yourself to think about when you're just in the churn. You don't think about the quality or the vitality of your life. And then your birthday comes and someone says, hey, you're 50. And then you go, oh, whoa, okay. Let's take a look at that and see what that means for the next part. And do I want it to be all the same? And I feel like that's probably what people ask themselves, maybe not the age thing, but they were like, I have been on this hamster wheel for so long and didn't even think that there was some grass over there that I could get off and go to. But now I want to explore that. I want to see what that looks like for me, and I talk about my grandmother often, and she's 98 years old. So I feel like I've got a good long stretch left to happen. If
Awesome.
I can mimic her. She's turning 99 in April. So I think we still got some
Give her a big hug next time you see her.
I shall. She's fire.
People tuning in, myself included, I've, I had a different perception of life before, that I had this checkpoint, 50, maybe 60, I'll retire and then, just do what my parents did, follow the same path. But then halfway through, I was like, actually, I don't need to follow that. That was their life. That's fine. It suited them, but I don't need to follow the same template, the same model. And I have a different perception now, similar to you. I'm looking at it as, I've done the first half. The first half was just groundwork. It was just, just building up all these things. And now it's the fun part. Now it's like, wow, I get to apply all these things that I've learned. And that's something that you've mentioned in your chapter as well, the knowledge and the skills that you've acquired during your corporate job that now you're bringing in and crystallizing and really kind of honing in on as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think, I don't have regrets about the way my journey was, because I learned a lot, and there's a richness of all those things layered in that you learn. And like you just said, it's like laying the groundwork. I feel like I just went to school for those few years, and now I'm taking those skills and applying them to what I consider this heart-centric business. I am letting go of this idea of work-life balance, because to me that is just some quaint term that was coined. It's just balance. It's just life. It's my life. It's the things I enjoy. And I think that's the other part about the heart-centric thing, is that we're doing something we enjoy. So it makes it just about our life. And all of those tools and skills that we learned, even from babysitting at 11, right through to, when I finished my corporate career a year ago, those are going to carry me forward in my business, and they do every day. But what I'm doing differently is now I'm adding the color, the flavor. It's like I learned all the basics of the recipe, and now I can go off the recipe and I can try things because I know my foundations are solid, and I can, paint outside the lines a little and see what that will look like and have fun. Like you said, that isn't a natural state for me. I'm, having fun I'm super serious. So that is something I'm looking forward to trying. Now that I have the basic tools to do the work, how can I mess it up a little and have a little fun and, learn to let that grow in a more organic way, knowing that my footing is solid.
I love that. I love the way that you've described it there about letting go in order for you to keep growing, to grow, letting go to grow. And you mentioned about, being courageous. The book's about, courageous humans who change their lives, right? So it's courageous is, you have something which you kind of unsure about, you have a certain fear about it, but you do it anyway because something's on the other side that's pulling you, that's saying, it is something worth doing. So you do it anyway. So I always felt that I was constrained, that I couldn't be myself. Like I had to wear the suit. I had to talk in a certain way. I had to behave in a certain way. I had to write in a certain way. For example, emails, whatever it is. I had to kind of follow a certain template, and I've always felt that like a straitjacket almost. When I show up for work, after work, for example, I just kind of have a big sigh of relief that that work day is done, that I can be myself and do the things that I love. But now, like you're saying, now it's the time to have fun because you are your own boss. You're the employee, the boss. You are it, and that's an amazing state to be in. I guess
it is. And I think exactly what you said, you're putting on a persona when you go to work every day. And most people come home and, they go, oh, they walk in the door and they're like, they shed that, I don't know if it translates to every country or culture, but I grew up with a show where Mr. Rogers, he would come in the door and he would put on his comfy sweater and his shoes, and that was his release from that corporate day that was sort of perceived there. And I think another shift that adds to that when you work for yourself, specifically for what I do, is I work with people who I like. I work with them. I don't work for them. And the collaboration is, enriches my life, but I enrich theirs. And being able to even say that word, like say that I enrich theirs, is a shift, right? You're now seeing your contribution come to life. But you can say to someone, this happened recently where you're like, I don't feel up to being, energetic or whatever today. Can we reschedule? Or someone has a family thing that happens and it's no longer a big thing because we're actually humans that are collaborating together in a human experience in a human way, rather than being like, oh, I can't say that because I'm going to get passed over for a promotion, or I'll look bad to the bosses, or, I can't just say that I'm having a bad day, or I can't talk about my mental health issues if I have them, or I can't talk about how my kid's sick and I need to care for them. All of that goes away when you work for yourself, because you can now just show up as you and you don't have to put the suit on. And I actually donated my suit. Like, I had a job where I had wore a suit for a while and I'm like, those have got to go. So they're gone.
Awesome.
And they
must be so liberating. It's like, yes.
Yep. They're not in my closet anymore. And I think there was some discomfort with that at first, because I felt like I was oversharing my life. Even writing the chapter, I felt like, ooh, am I oversharing something? No, I've been writing for a long time, but never shared it with anyone except maybe one or two really close friends. So that was the first time I wrote something that would be shared with others. And there was that feeling of, I'm taking off that suit, that mask, and just being myself. And I think that's definitely the courageous part, but it is a huge sigh and breath of fresh air when you can now just show up as yourself and say, today I am like on fire, let's go. Or today, no, I'm not my best self today, and I need to shift that day to, and I think that's one of the best gifts about working for yourself, is the ability to have that freedom to flow and shift with how you really feel or how you are really feeling.
Yeah, I just got reminded to what Tim Ferriss wrote. He was describing, exactly what you just said there. If he woke up in one morning and he felt that he needed more sleep, for example, he would say, look, please reschedule all my meetings. I just need to rest more today. And allowing himself to do that, and, not forcing the issue, the fact that, he said that if I had showed up for the meetings, I wouldn't be there 100%. And what's the point of that? So I'm allowed to allow myself. And that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, that you have the ability to do that, and you're not having to, show up half-heartedly because, like you're saying, the bosses might frown upon that, or you have to put up a show to fit in. One thing before we move on, Kristina, you mentioned about consistency, something I picked up a while ago. You mentioned about consistency and the role it plays. What are your thoughts about, people tuning in? I know, myself included, achieving consistency is something of a struggle. A lot of people struggle with this, with all the intentions that they have today. Okay, I'm going to try and be consistent. And then you have an off day, for example. How have you dealt with consistency?
It's interesting because I literally had this conversation with someone yesterday. What I recognize now about myself today that wasn't the same a year ago is my recovery time is faster. So with consistency, we tend to have this all or nothing mentality. We're going to do the diet, we're going to do the exercise, we're going to learn the thing. And it's like, we got to go all in. And in the moment we slip up or perceive to slip up, we drop ourselves down. And then oftentimes what happens is you either stay in that spot, or you're in that spot and you think, what's the point? And so you just go down even further. And then your consistency is just thrown out the window. But for me, I have discovered that consistency is less rigid. It's about continually, intentionally choosing that thing that you want to be consistent about. But when you're vibrating at a higher level and wanting to stay there, when you have a day, and I had one recently where you kind of go down in that little storm cloud and you sit there. But what I noticed is, because I'm intentional about consistency, I didn't drop down further and I didn't stay there. I allowed myself to feel what it was I was feeling, whether that's like the Tim Ferriss where I just had to have rest, or I needed to reach out to a friend, or I needed to listen to music or meditate, or whatever it was for me or for you. My time there was honoring how I felt versus wallowing in what I felt. And then once I honored it, saw it, dealt with it, I just moved right back up to the higher vibe instead of staying there or going down. And I think that's how consistency is working for me, not an all or nothing mentality, but a intentional, continually choosing it kind of mentality.
It takes a different perspective, a shift in mindset about how you approach consistency. And like you're mentioning, allowing yourself to have that, for example, day off if you need it, but because you're already, intentionally wanting to be consistent, like you said, your recovery time is much, much, much quicker, myself included. Sometimes, I want to be consistent in doing certain things. I'll get a day or 2 days that I didn't do it. Previously, I would say, I'd be devastated. I was like, how am I going to do this? I started kind of going into kind of negative energy. Whereas now I say, it's okay, but I know I'm going to get back on doing it very, very quickly. And, lo and behold, the next day I start doing it again, journal writing or meditation, so whatever it is, there is that kind of, we want to be consistent, but we're not robots. We're human beings. Things happen, right? Things happen.
Yeah. And I think letting go of this rigid need for things to just, like you said, be robotic. It's like that's not what we are. And the whole world, everything fluctuates and has seasons and shifts. And I think, recognizing when you're in a season that maybe you can't show up in the same way as you want to, you kind of have to, again, get out of that comparison, either to your own self, like comparing yourself to the self that was you a month ago, because something's happening in your life that may not allow for that. And I think honoring that part, it's not about, letting go of everything that you want to do. It's not about being like, oh, what's the point? It's not that at all. I think when you're making intentional choices to continue that consistency, it's never gone because you're still thinking about it. Morning routines are a big thing in our content world that you and I live in. And everyone talks about them and does them and has a 10-step to them. And it's like this whole big thing, having a morning routine. And I let that really derail me for a while, because there was a few months where I was like solid and I did the morning routine and all the time, but then things shifted and a season changed for me. And I spent months beating myself up because I wasn't being consistent with that morning routine. And then I was like, why am I doing that? And that is when I said, it's not about being rigid with that consistency. It's about looking at where I'm at now. What is the purpose of that thing that I wanted to do? The purpose of a morning routine was to start my day off with good energy and to feel centered. I didn't need to do it all the same way now as I did 6 months ago. So I shifted it. And now I don't beat myself up for it anymore. I'm like, okay, this is the morning routine that I can manage at this moment. And if it's 5 minutes instead of an hour, and if it's, I do it most days, but not all, that's okay. I'm still intentionally choosing that feeling and that energy that I want for my day in some form or another. I released myself from that, which is good.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Kristina. Again, people hopefully will be able to kind of resonate with this and being grateful for you to be able to share that story with us. We are coming to the tail end of this conversation. I know it's just flown by. It's nearly an hour now. So.
I made it through.
It's awesome because I love this, because I love this conversation. And again, just before we go, I just want to bring in the book that we've been talking about, Authentic, Courageous Humans Who Change Their Lives by Rewriting Their Story. Like I mentioned, 21 authors have come together to write their own chapters and their journeys of being courageous and finding their authentic self in this book. It is an international #1 best-selling book, available on Amazon in paperback and digital format. So I would encourage you listening to this, go ahead. I'm going to keep repeating this because it's for a good cause. Go ahead and purchase this book after you listen to this podcast. Kristina's chapter is also in here. All the authors have agreed that all the proceeds will go towards the charity Elimu Girls, who help underprivileged teens in Kenya to have a voice, a choice, and a bank account. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and check out Elimu Girls as well. We're going to have the information in the podcast description as well. So I just want to give a quick shout out to people to go ahead and purchase this book. Okay.
Yeah. What a great way to make a contribution.
Absolutely. So, Kristina, we are coming into the tail end of the conversation. Before we go, we will end with the usual quick 5 question round. Are you okay to go?
Let's go.
Awesome. Okay. Kristina, Firstly, what is your favorite word?
Oh my goodness, that's hard. I love words. I I used to read the dictionary. I still do. So I love words. I don't know if I can pick a favorite word.
It's okay,
I
two
can't pick
or three.
I can't pick a favorite word. I love the word integrity, even
Wow.
though I know sometimes that has some negative things, but for me it has a lot of positive things. I don't know. I might have to come back to that one.
That's okay. Integrity is fine. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, question number 2. What are you currently reading or listening to?
Oh, I am currently reading books. I tend to not read one at a time. I'm reading the story brand, Donald Miller. I'm going to have to look on my shelf. Oh, it's actually 4 books.
Oh, wow.
I'm reading Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, Essentialism, Greg McKeown. So good. I'm just starting The Art of Possibility, and I'm finishing Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire. That's a Jen Hatmaker book. I mean, they're all about what we just talked about.
So thank you. So that will be part of my reading list as well. So thank you for sharing that.
They're great. Yeah.
Okay, question number 3. If you could meet someone either living or past, who would that be?
It might be a little bit cliche, perhaps, but I would like to sit with Oprah. I know that's probably like a big one. There's something about her energy and her wisdom that I would like to just be in the same space as her.
Wow, awesome. So Oprah, if you're listening to this podcast, Kristina would love to sit and have a chat with you over coffee, hopefully, or on a show, whatever it is. So make it happen, please, Oprah. Okay, so question number 4. What advice would you give the younger Kristina?
Oh, I think that would definitely be to have fun. I would say that, I was pretty serious my whole life. And I think now fun makes me uncomfortable. And that's something I'm working on changing. I think it's a sense of, fun to me is like a sense of loss of control. And I think so that whole release thing, just have fun and be okay with not having everything in a tight little box and organized. I think that would be good.
Nice. Great answer. So question number 5, last question. What can we expect from Kristina in the next 5 years?
Well, I am, already shifting from what I was a year ago. I'm moving my business towards being a full agency where, I'm giving myself space to grow and other women space to become their own entrepreneurs and grow. And so I'm so excited about that. And that will happen. My husband and I are trying to buy our first home. So I'll have a home that's our own so we can make that mark. And I think that there will be another writing in my future. I have some ideas, definitely continuing my work with Tina, and she has new books coming out. And I think there'll be one that will inspire me to share more.
Nice. Looking forward to it. It's super exciting already. I'm just looking forward to what, when the next 5 years will have in store for you and all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, Kristina, just before we go, how can people get in touch with you and connect with you?
Yeah, on Instagram, my company is The Spectacular Middle. So I'm at The Spectacular Middle. That's also the same for my website, spectacularmiddle.com. That's how you can find me.
We're going to put all the handles in the description on the podcast. So stay tuned for that. So, okay, Kristina, so that is all the time that we have today with our guest, Kristina Brummer. This has been the Academy Podcast with Kristina Brummer. I am truly grateful if you're tuning in. You stayed until the end. Thank you so much for your support in tuning in and sharing your thoughts with us. Kristina, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your journey on this podcast. So any last advice you want to share with people out there?
No, but I thought of my word. It's actually
awesome.
Bridge. Why I didn't remember my word, but that's my word for this year is bridge. And I really feel like I'm bridging that gap to the next step. So I think, that's my advice, is just to give yourself space to bridge that gap and find your own way to value your contributions for yourself.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Kristina. So peace and love to you guys always. And that's bye-bye from me and from Kristina.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Until the next episode, bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in from wherever you are. My sincere hope is that this episode has not only resonated with you, but also given you some invaluable tips and strategies to improve your life. Don't forget to share your comments with me. As you know, I love to hear your views. Also, remember to follow the Academy, follow me, my guests, and tag us on our social media handles, which will be provided in the description. Most importantly, please leave a review and let me know that you've heard this podcast and how it has impacted you. Until the next episode, stay safe, stay healthy, and peace and love from me always.